everyone, welcome. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Brandy Allen. I'm the Learning Events Director with Alliance for Innovation. For those of you that are new to the Alliance for Innovation, we are local governments inspiring innovation to advance communities for all citizens. We do that through a couple different ways, one of which is what you're participating in now, a webinar. We find stories from across the country, from risk takers and those that are brave to go first. We find their stories and come and share them with you all. So you get to hear how they did it, why they did it, and give you an opportunity to figure out how to do it in your own community. We have a panel of rock stars with us today. We have over 40 years of experience with us today. So get your questions ready. If there's a question they don't know the answer to, I'd be shocked. But if they don't, we'll still get your answer. We've got a lot of experience on our panel today. They are going to share with you about a national benchmarking report about better websites for all, what that data means to you and how you can incorporate that work, incorporate the report findings into our work. So it's my pleasure now to introduce you, and then I will turn it over to Jillian. It will lead us in today's discussion. First up, I'd like to introduce Anissa DiVicente. She's webmaster at the city of Culver City. She's been web developer with over 20 years of experience. From an art background and degree, she developed sites taking an artistic approach, valuing design and visual interest along with usability and functionality, which we have, before we jumped on, we learned that beautiful art piece behind her is her husband's work. And her house has her husband's art all over the house. I'm not surprised at all. That's your approach to web design. I love it. We can't wait to hear more about that. She's been with the city of Culver City as their webmaster for over 15 years. Prior to working in local government, she developed sites for the entertainment industry, nonprofits, small business, corporate sites, and e-commerce. Welcome. We're so happy to have you. Next, we have Jillian Alps, marketing director for Moncito. Jillian Alves, excuse me. Jillian brings to the table more than 15 years of experience in various SaaS platforms, CMS, digital, and strategic marketing. Jillian's passionate about data, technology, customers, creativity, and where they all intersect. On a daily basis, Jillian runs the marketing division at Moncito and is proud advocate for how web governance can deliver better digital experience for all. Last but not least, if you jumped on early, we were talking about our vacation stories. Josh's getting ready to head out with his family. Before he does that, he's a sales director at Open Cities. Josh has worked in the GovTech space for close to 10 years, where his main focus has been partnering with government organizations on their digital transformation. His focus is to help cities and counties better serve their residents by creating an experience that allows users the ability to accomplish more tasks online. So thanks so much, Josh, for squeezing us in before your wonderful time away.
No
Welcome.
problem.
We're so happy to have each of you here. Jillian, I'm turning it over to you now.
Yeah, thank you for the warm introduction. So I will also just note, I'm based in Copenhagen, but you'll hear that I have an American accent, and really excited to be on the line with all of you today. But just full disclosure, my children are being watched by my mother-in-law behind me. I hope they behave. But yeah, so today we're going to go through a few things, and we're going to, of course, dig into why websites matter, why local governments websites matter. But more importantly, focusing on kind of the website experience and why that matters so much, and why we did the report that we did, and how the website experience encompasses so many different elements that would create an equitable and kind of inclusive experience on the website. We are so lucky to have Anissa on the line. She's going to be sharing a lot of different insights from Culver City. We'll get an introduction to kind of the projects that they have in, and then she's also going to dive in on some of the different elements we talk about from, you know, UX perspective, accessibility, how she works with quality assurance, as well as website performance, and we'll talk about the data points behind the report on that as well. And then finally, of course, we'll give you some key takeaways. I promised, we will have some time for Q&A. So please just don't be shy, ask away during. If I see it during and I feel like it's an appropriate time, we'll take it, but otherwise we'll take them at the end. And yeah, without further ado, let's kind of just talk a little bit about why government websites matter. And of course they do, but more importantly, what's some of the reasons behind how important they really are, especially given the light of the past year and a half. So I'm going to hand it over to Josh to take you through that.
Perfect. And really quickly, before I talk about government websites, and Nissa, if your husband has an artist website and our Etsy page, drop it in the chat. Let's drive some business. No one
Local
asked me to
business.
say that, but like, hey, let's promote some local businesses. Anyways, so Jillian and I, we've done some version of this webinar a handful of times, and it always feels weird in the beginning to talk about the importance of government websites to a room full of government employees. Obviously, you could do a better job of talking about the impact that your site has had for your community. But as you all know, really the government site, it's the first touch point that most people have with their local government. But I think if we were to be brutally honest with ourselves, we would admit that even on our own sites, there's barriers that your residents have when accessing information or interacting with online services. So in today's talk, we're obviously going to be talking about ADA, reading levels, et cetera, things that we tend to think about when we do think about accessibility, equity, but creating an accessible and equitable experience for everyone goes deeper than that. And the report, this benchmark report that we ended up doing, I think really has some great data points. If you think about the community that you serve, if you serve more of a rural community, or if you serve lower income families, they might not have access to high-speed internet. They might not have access to a desktop or laptop, and driving into government buildings is a lot more difficult for them. So we're also going to be looking at it from the lens of having a true digital or online experience where anyone can interact with their government services, regardless of the device or time of day, right? By creating the self-service portal where your residents can conduct any business that they want to, having that like true digital front door. If you want to go to the next slide, Jillian. So by creating an experience where all of those that you serve can interact with the site, there really is a drastic benefit to you as well as the web visitor. And I'm not going to read all of these, but the first one that I want to call out is that there's an increase in trust, right? So whoever is coming to your site, be it on a desktop, be it on a mobile phone, if they're able to self-service, there's that increase in trust. And now more than ever, we need to continue working on building that trust, right? There's 9 times more likely for them to trust that specific agency. And if you want to jump to the next page, the other one that I want to call out is allowing people to self-service online helps you meet or exceed your budgetary goals, right? Dissatisfied customers, people that are looking to accomplish something and can't, for whatever reason, the likelihood is that they're going to call, send emails, maybe drive into city or county hall, taking all of you away from the 20 plus other hats that you wear. So it's harder for you to hit those goals. And then going to the next slide, this slide really showcases that making an accessible and equitable site, making a site that allows people to self-service more online can really save your government a lot of money. It's really pennies on the dollar when we can do online transactions. And there's a lot of good examples of what government entities are doing in regards to accessibility and digital equity. A couple that I want to call out. So during the pandemic, City and County of Denver knew they needed a website that was more ADA compliant than their legacy site. So in less than 4 months, they ended up launching a site that drastically increased their accessibility score. And the 2 main people that were working on that site before on their old site, they were taking roughly 8 hours to retrain content editors and having to fix accessibility issues. After they launched, they're saving 8 hours a week. But the other one that I think is really innovative that I wanted to call out was Kansas City, Kansas, and what they did. So prior to this innovation and prior to the pandemic, for residents that received certain traffic violations, they had the ability to go to court, plead guilty to lesser charges, and then pay double the fine to have their case dismissed. And like I said previously, it was something that was always an in-court appearance. And when the pandemic hit, courts obviously shut down, and they didn't want to stop providing that service. And instead of being stuck in the mindset of, well, this was a process that we've been doing for the last 30,000 years, they ended up innovating, right? So they created a mobile responsive and accessible online form that allowed residents to go through that same process, but at the comfort of their own home. Prior to creating that online form, that process took roughly like a few days up to weeks for the government to end up approving. Now it takes them 3 to 4 hours to approve that process. And in the first month of launching, they saw 48 forms being submitted. So there's a lot of different ways to start that journey of being more accessible and equitable, and we certainly will dive into that later in this webinar. But I'm going to pass it off to Jillian so she can talk a little bit more about our, philosophy behind the benchmark report.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. So Josh mentioned a bunch of these things already, but really what kind of drew us to do this benchmark report was we wanted to take a look at what is the lay of the land right now when we look at city websites and government websites. What's the benchmark? Where are we now, and where do we need to get to? And the report looked at so many different things that ultimately, even it might be one individual metric, really are an important element of the holistic look of an inclusive and equitable experience on the website. So this report is available in one of, maybe Josh, you can drop the link in the chat if you want to download it and take it a look at it. It is, I'm sure we can distribute it after as well, but this is the report. We also did a combination with a partner of ours called Common Look, who looks specifically at document and PDF accessibility. But yeah, we launched this on April, and we're really happy to still be talking about it because it's still super relevant. The criteria that we looked at in the report, I won't go through each different element. We kind of broke it into 3 sections: the website experience, website quality, and website performance. And we're going to dive into each of these individually and kind of talk through some of the highlights and takeaways from the report that we saw. And then we're also going to ask Anissa about some of the things that they're doing in these areas. So super excited to kick off on that. So with that said, Anissa, finally, let's get you talking. Can you give us maybe a little bit of introduction to Culver City and the role of your website in your community?
Yes, definitely. So thank you, Jillian. As you can see in the slide, Culver City is not a huge city. We only have about 40,000 residents during the day, but because we have a lot of big businesses and movie studios in our immediate area, we have up to 60,000 daytime workers. So we like to have our website kind of do a combination of helping our residents as well as those visitors into our city. We are what you would call in LA County, but more in the West Los Angeles region. So we're a little bit south of Beverly Hills, east of Marina del Rey, and kind of northwest from Inglewood. If you know any of those, well, Beverly Hills, everyone knows, but not everyone knows Marina del Rey or Inglewood. But if you do LAX, we're kind of about a little bit northeast of LAX. So we're kind of right in the heart of the West LA area. The city has just over 1,000 employees. We have quite a few part-time, but at least 800 full-time employees, and we're pretty lean on our staff. So a lot of our staff have a lot of multiple tasks that they do, and including the website as part of that. And we recently launched on Open Cities with our new website design the end of last November, December, which was huge for us. I love the Open Cities platform, but the big, huge difference in our new website is that we focused on services. Our previous version was still kind of broken up between like businesses and residents, where we kind of scrapped that approach and went all service centric. So you're just looking for what you want. It doesn't matter who you are or what you come from. And I think that's really streamlined our approach, less clicks to get to where you want, making it more user-friendly, a lot more modern layout, and the search right there, focus-centered, as well as the OpenCity search engine was, I think, way better than using Google search. We've had previous issues with Google search, which we no longer have those kind of issues now that it's all platform-based. Plus the flexibility with using the OpenCity platform, we can really work on that content, make it more user-friendly, not worry about the mobile version. We know it's going to be responsive. So that's taken really nice approach for our users.
And we're going to dive into it in some different ways, but yeah, I was just curious to say, like, what kind of practices you made sure were a part of this redesign process that would help make the website more kind of inclusive and equitable from a website experience standpoint.
So I worked with all of our departments and staff liaisons with all of them, as well as researched quite a few other municipal websites to kind of figure out the best approach for layout, get feedback from those departments on what their users are looking for, what issues they're having, and really took that input and put this as part. We did some user surveys as well, kind of like, what problems do you have with our current site? What information is hard to find? So we kind of prioritized what the needs were for our users as well as our staff, and really built that into our new website. Of course, it is still work in progress. We're working on it. But I think for most people, it's understanding what the process is to complete the tasks at hand. And that's where OpenCities with their service pages was really helpful with us in doing that.
Awesome. Well, Josh, do you want to dive in and kind of talk a little bit about the results we saw around kind of these topics from the report?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for all that information. And I know you and the team really dove into this digital transformation, and getting buy-in from the residents was a key part of that. And I think one thing that you mentioned is actually so true, that digital transformation and web, it's not just this one-time project, right? It's a constant work in progress, right? There always is this iteration. So I thought that was some great insight. As we start diving into the benchmark report, top tasks is this first area that I'm going to talk about. And really, this is one of the things that we see that helps your web visitors to be able to find the information that they're looking for. We say without understanding the business of Gov, right? The idea of top tasks on your homepage, it's not a new idea. What I think is a new idea, though, is shifting the mindset of what a top task is, and then this is instead of having it more so be service centered. The good news is that the data shows that roughly like 90%, a little bit over 90% of the websites had some sort of top tasks displayed on the homepage, and 73 allowed users to report some sort of issue from start to finish on a mobile device. But as we peel back the layers and we actually looked at what pages or services those top tasks drove people to, I think that there's definitely need for improvement, right? What we ended up seeing is that most websites had roughly 3 to 5 top tasks, but the top tasks were very broad, right? And if I have any city clerks on here, love what you do. It's very important. But if you were to dive into analytics, I think that there's other services that those top tasks should be than maybe city council information. And when we look at the data as we start implementing websites for our customers, what we tend to see is that there's roughly 8 to 12 top level tasks that drive people to the website roughly 80% of the time. And there's definitely some seasonality of that. And those top tasks that should be on the homepage, those top tasks should be on the homepage, so your website visitors don't need to go on this Where's Waldo hunt. I think it's also important, whether it's OpenCities, and we don't want this to be an OpenCities show, obviously, but whatever web vendor you choose provides you the flexibility to change those top tasks based on data, based on seasonality, even based on device, because how your web visitors are interacting with you vary by device as well. And Jillian, if you want to move forward one more, in the event that a web visitor can't find information on the website by those top tasks, that default next thing that we see is that they go to the search bar. So our data show that 95% of the organizations that we looked at passed, 5% being excellent, 90% pass. And what that meant for us was that predominantly you had a search bar that was above the fold, right? It did not require any sort of scrolling. But similar to top tasks, I think that there's some work that we can do in regards to the search experience on the site. I believe Nissa mentioned this, but it's not uncommon when I look at websites that the search engine landing page has paid Google ads that are taking people directly off of your site to a non-governmental site, right? It's disrupting that user experience. Again, if I'm on a mobile phone and I'm trying to search for something specific and the top 5 things on the search engine landing page are all Google ads, it's going to be harder for me to get that information. I might call to try to get that. So what we say a positive search experience should be, if you think of Google, it should be predictive, right? As somebody starts typing, it should dynamically curate what information they're looking for, where they can click and it takes them directly to that page. It also should help bridge that city speak to resident speak by having a built for gov thesaurus. One of the examples that I always like to use is, there's so many different words that we can write content for that mean the same thing: garbage, trash, waste, if you're in Australian, rubbish. And if we don't create the page the right way, if we don't put, let's say the word trash as a keyword and we're just typing in waste or we're typing in garbage, that content might not curate. So having a partner that can have this built for gov thesaurus that links those words together, and then also making sure that the right content is being indexed. So those are the first 2 things. And if we want to go to the next page, want to dive in a little bit more around that website redesign that you ended up doing, Anissa. So again, you talked about this service-minded approach, and what these screenshots here show is the 369 top tasks that you ended up deciding to have on your homepage. How did the city decide what information should be prioritized?
So let me preface to say that on our old website, we had individual tasks where these are more category based. And some of those were actual top tasks and others were more politically placed on our website. And that was problematic in different ways, because just because city council or city manager thinks it should be there doesn't mean users need it to be there. So I went and actually used Google Analytics to figure out what are the actual pages that our users are going to most often, what is that category they're requesting, and by being able to do categories. Obviously, if Parks and Rec sometimes it's the park site, sometimes it's some of the recreation, sometimes it's the swimming. So rather than them taking up 3 spots on our homepage, by having the category, it easily allows users to identify one click to get those 3 different items. So we can have less items on our homepage, but still direct people in a user-friendly way. And that has really been great. And actually, just this morning, I updated our top tasks based on my analytic data. So the top 3 tasks on our site now are the top ones that people are going to. So they're front and center. They don't even have to potentially scroll or look down farther on their page. So, and also by switching to that area, when council or city manager comes to me and say, hey, I need this on the home page, it needs to be a service, it's like, no, this is done. I have an explanation of how these are done. This is signed off on, and we can add it farther down on the page if they find it interesting, or we make a news item for them to kind of promote it that way. So it takes out the politics.
I think that's great that you talked about the politics of websites. We hear that all the time of when you have a city councilor, when you have a department that they all think that their content is the most important, right? Everyone wants to have a homepage visibility, right? And usually very important real estate. So I love the approach that you all are taking with like, have data be the bad cop, right? Like you get to be the good cop, but have data say like, hey, this is what our users are looking for. This is what should be front and center to drive people as quick as possible. And it's going to actually benefit you because you're going to get less calls when people can't find that information or because whatever the case is. So that's fantastic. Jillian, if you want to jump into the next portion.
Yeah, so I get to talk a little bit more about maybe what's not working as well based on what we saw in the benchmark report. So we, as a platform, obviously Moncito scans for, or case maybe not obviously, if you don't know, we do scan for web accessibility issues. So against the WCAG 2.1 is the newest one. But when we ran all of the sites that we were looking at through for the report, we found that, yeah, it's on an uptick. There's definitely some focus on there. In fact, just over half are tagged as good. And by good, we mean they're kind of showing that they're on a path to compliance. Very few in the excellent category, which would be, showing that they're really taking that extra step and in terms of our scores on our platform. Would be an 80 or above, and good would be 70 to 79. So that said, there's still 46% that aren't even hitting that. So it continues to be a struggle. It is one of those things that is always a work in progress. I mean, the second you add content to your website, you're going to have probably a little tick on your accessibility score until you made sure and double checked everything as it should be. Adding new forms, you're adding more design and stuff, it gets a little bit more complicated, but it is super important. And, we talk a lot about accessibility, for users who need it. So, I think it's 1 in 4 US adults has a disability of some sort. That's no small number. That said, and I know, Anissa, we've talked about this, but it's definitely our philosophy as well, is that an accessible website is great for everyone. So there's a lot of things that go into making a website accessible, but also make the website experience that much better for anyone who's trying to access information. Similarly, it would be need to highlight that PDFs, and I know probably many of you have lots of them on your website, also need to be tagged and marked up appropriately in order to be accessible. And we found in the report that actually only 1 in 4 had more than half of their documents tagged. So it is one of those tedious things, but important to keep an eye on and make sure that, at least the ones that are being accessed the most often are also made accessible. We, love working with all of our customers and clients to talk about this. Like, listen, it's a journey, it's not a destination. Like, probably never going to hit 100%, right? Aiming for it, of course, is commendable, but it is just knowing that it is a proper practice that just needs to be built in from the beginning. So I know, Anissa, you've had some great points when we discussed before about how you guys tackle it kind of from the start and how your processes look at, when you're working with your content editor. So I won't take the words out of your mouth, but I thought maybe you could just walk us through some of the processes that you have put in place specifically around accessibility and how you view it and why is it important to Culver City?
So yes, I personally see accessibility as actual usability. So whenever your website's accessible, I find that it makes it overall more user-friendly. So it's not just for those people with disabilities, but I think everyone can have a better experience the more accessible a website is. And of course, as we know in accessibility, even how things display on mobile is part of that process. So we want to make sure all the devices and everyone can access that content easily and understand it. Now, so yes, I've had to learn a lot about accessibility in the last quite a few years. And it's been a fun process. And to make my life easier as the webmaster, I've implemented an accessibility. Actually, I worked on our accessibility policy for the city, as well as implemented a training campaign for all of our content editors in order for someone to get access to the website management system, they have to take an accessibility training that I give, and they actually have to pass a test now, starting this year. At the end of the training, I give them a little web page that I built where they have 10 accessibility errors, which they need to find and fix. And obviously they need a passing score on that. And they will be required to do this annually. So I can make sure that any new things that come in that they're aware of. But I don't give them a full accessibility training of everything, because my God, that would take days. I really just focus on the 5 main things that as an editor, they would normally make wrong. So making sure their hyperlinks are proper text, they're doing those image alt tags, they're using heading tags properly, those kind of things, which are super easy to teach. And once people understand it, they don't make those errors in the future. I had a lot of people love to use heading tags to make that font big and bold and all different sizes. And then once I told them how to actually use it, they kind of understood why I wouldn't let them use it the way they wanted to. But then the light bulb went off and they're like, oh, this is great. I understand. And look how nice the page looks. So obviously training your content editors makes your life as a administrator much easier. Plus, I know that what they're doing, they're also going to replicate in their email communications they're sending out to the public and other things. So that has been big. And then also we've implemented a workflow. So whenever someone creates a new page or updates the page content, it goes through a workflow where the IT department has to then approve it and review it. So we're making sure visually they're not doing some weird colors, it's all in line, they're not doing some weird formatting on the page, and for accessibility as well. And then we even have a couple departments that have internal reviews before it goes to IT to make sure they are also passing those departmental as well.
Awesome. It's I knew that would be super interesting takeaway for the audience, just kind of practical. We do have a practical question from Jamie, who was just wondering how you deal with graphic images that have words in them and how, to make sure that they're identifiable through assistive technology. Super detailed question, but I thought, why not? Let's just bring it in. And
yeah, that is the fun part of my training, where I show them like those infographics and graphics with lots of text. And I basically say, 1, let's try to avoid this. I explain how it's not accessible, but I also do teach the rules on how to make it accessible. Like some of them I've actually converted into HTML and text. So it looks similar to the graphic, but it's not a graphic. It might have graphic elements, but the text is in HTML. Others, the rule is that if the text is on the page directly next to that image, you can basically do it that way, which I've had a few people do that, but a lot of people go, oh, I'd rather not use the image if I have to write all of that text as well on the page. And of course, the third rule is where you can link to a web page with that same information, but no one has taken me up on that offer. They don't want to do the work, Jamie, once they learn what's involved.
Yeah. Jamie, hope that gave you some inspiration on how to look at that. But it is just one of those things, because like you said, there are different solutions. There's workarounds, there's way to do it, and there's easy ways and quick ways, and not so quick ways, right? Thank you so much for taking us through that. I wanted to dive next into kind of website quality and working towards an error-free website, which for me, and funny enough, I've mentioned it now, it does still relate back to good website user experience. And as you mentioned, an accessible website is about a good user experience on your website. And obviously, if you have broken links or a page that doesn't exist, that's a very poor website experience. And they do happen. You have a lot of people kind of adding content, moving things around, not understanding the implication of, that might break a link on a different page. So in the report, we dove into kind of quality assurance, looking at different things like broken links, broken images, misspellings, and potential misspellings. So just over 50% of city websites scored in the excellent category. However, 37%, over a third, did fail. So there's always plenty of fun ones to dig into, finding funny misspellings. But obviously, keeping on top of making sure that all the content that you use time in putting onto the site is accessible is an important task and an important piece of work when you're managing a website. And there's also the practice of, okay, this content is no longer relevant, and how to properly get rid of it so it doesn't break other things as well. So plenty of work to be done there, but I don't think that's unique to government websites. That's pretty universal for anyone that's looking at websites. Similarly, in the context of quality assurance, we look at readability of content in our platform. And so we scan websites to see what kind of the average readability score, if you will, is for the website. And it was, an overwhelming amount, percent was at a college reading level. And that becomes a huge equity conversation when you talk about, the average US adult with English as a first language reads at an 8th grade reading level. And then there's plenty of communities out there that would have plenty of residents that don't have English as a first language. So that adds to it again. And you're probably working with content editors who are experts in their field, but it's about how to bring them down a level so that everyone can understand the information. But again, to the point that it creates a better user experience. Not all of us have time to read novels and academic speak. We're going to the website to get the content we need fast. We want it quick and broken down with bullet points and so forth. We don't need the necessarily academic experience of content on city websites. And you can correct me if you're wrong, and there's probably some bespoke cases where I am wrong on that, but that was super interesting. And I know, Anissa, we caught up before this webinar. You're talking a little bit of some of the things that you do around this. Can you just kind of walk us through how you tackle quality assurance? And I know you mentioned a lot of stuff around readability, so would love for you to share with the audience your kind of best practices around that.
Yes, readability is definitely a big issue with government websites, and especially with a lot of departments. I know certain public notices, there's those legal requirements and legalese that need to go out. And so then they want to just copy and paste that on our website. And I kind of go, well, what does this mean? Like, I read it and I'm like, okay, if I can't understand it, no. And so we get into this little argument of, well, it has to say this legally. So we kind of go into, okay, let's make your title user-friendly. Let's give a nice user-friendly description of what this means. And farther down the page, you can have all the legalese you want. And a lot of times it's like, if it's a page that reference municipal code or ordinance, they like to put the text of that in there. And it's like, oh no. Our yard sale permit originally was all that kind of municipal code language. And I'm like, no, let's just state it user-friendly. So it's easier to understand, because sometimes how it's worded, it's a little confusing. And then everyone can understand it. So rather than, saying that, it has to take place on like these kind of things, just make it simple. Like, simplify the language. You can always link to the code for more information, as long as that simple language isn't against what you're trying to say. That's what's more important, is getting people to understand if they're even interested in the topic. A lot of people just don't even know that. And so that was the first part of that. Like right now we're doing a polystyrene ban. I don't know what polystyrene means. So it's basically a type of plastic. So it's like, okay, how about we say plastic ban and then explain what polystyrene is, and then we use the term plastic and not polystyrene for our entire page. And once I got across that idea, they're like, oh yeah, it is much simpler to read and makes it easier. And it's like, yeah, no one uses that term. Let's use common terms. We can always put that legal thing on there, but make it easy. So that's the first step in trying to reduce that government speak. We do use the Hemingway app to copy and paste our content. So it gives that insight into what words could possibly be changed, what sentences are really long, maybe they could be broken up, maybe things in smaller paragraphs. So I think that's helped staff a lot, even before it gets to me, to learn how to rewrite stuff. They can see that reading level right there on the page and start working and editing, and they see it change, and that really inspires them to keep changing it. We have a lot of pages that are still college and unfortunately above college that we're working on, and it's just trying to figure out what the best way to do that. So I work with them as well on that. And all of my content editors are also users in Moncito. So I've created groups in Moncito where, based on their department or division, so they get the report when it comes out every 7 to 10 days. So they quickly and easily see if there's any broken links, any misspellings, policy violations. So they can log in, see what those are on the pages. Been installing the Moncito Chrome plugin so they can go to that page, see where that problem is if they're not sure. And that's really helped our quality assurance. And then I go and police only so often because I know they're on top of it for the most part. So it's only those few staff that are slow to respond that I need to actually kind of knock on their door and say, hey, here's your report. You need to work on it. Where before it was a complete opposite. I'm always having to like make a list of what's wrong and send it to them or fix it myself. So yeah, having them as Moncito users and those reports have been saving my life.
Yes, no one likes to use half their day going around and telling people what's wrong with their work. We're also big fans of kind of quote unquote drinking our own champagne. So in the marketing department, we're all in our own Moncito platform as well. Anytime we're launching content, using it and having some ownership so that I can rest easy that, we're going out talking about this platform, that we're putting our money where our mouths are as well. Okay, and then the last kind of topic, we've got 15 minutes left, so try and get through this one quick so we can open up for some good Q&A. And it's just looking at website performance. So the report looked at, based on Google Lighthouse metrics, just the performance of city websites. And the score is quite low, like 45. So a lot can be done there. And that looks at a number of different metrics. And then we also looked at the average response time of US city websites, which is also higher than the standard for that. Obviously, these kind of topics contribute to a website experience if it doesn't load, quickly, or, God forbid it's not available. That doesn't make it very accessible. But also how quickly you interact with the page and how it behaves on your browser, depending on your internet connection. So again, if you think about equity, if you've got residents that are just in remote areas that don't have high internet speeds, your website still needs to perform for them, right? So these are the kind of metrics that we were looking at and finding that there's still some work to be done. So in terms of uptime, only a quarter of the sites had an uptime of 99.999%, which is what you really want to see. That said, the majority of them were over 99. So it's not horrible, but always something to keep in mind and make sure that you're on top of. And I know, just quickly, Anis, if you want to touch on how you kind of monitor website performance and uptime, I'm sure the audience would be really interested to hear.
So yes, I also believe that performance is equity. If you are on a cell phone and don't have Wi-Fi, you need that to load fast. You can't be waiting 5 minutes for a homepage to load and then another minute each page. So we need to make things quick. Obviously, I love having my solution hosted because I don't have to worry about uptime. That's on them. No worries about security. they have to do the performance as turns and load. I just make sure that the content I'm uploading, my image sizes are optimized, things like that. So I do what I can, but it's all kind of on Open Cities, which is nice, or if it's on your provider, it's really nice to see that. It's really helped because we had self-hosted before and had issues where our site went down, or we've had a small hack once where some content got, so not having to worry about that, obviously, as a city is really nice. We do uptime monitoring. I know Montecito does that. We also have a third party that monitors all of our servers and websites and external sites. So we get notified right away, probably usually within 5 minutes in daytime, normal working hours, and then every 15 to 30 minutes overnight in those more dead hours. So then if we notice something that maybe our providers haven't, we can let them know. And if it is something internally, we can make sure we can get it up and running as soon as possible. So yeah, it doesn't help to have a website if no one can get to it in a timely manner.
No, definitely not. Awesome. Well, I've been talking a lot, so I'm really happy to hand it back over to Josh, who's just gonna kind of work through some of these key takeaways. But Anissa, thank you so much for all of your insight into those different points from the report. It was hopefully very helpful for all of you to kind of take those figures and understand and apply it to something more applicable with the inspiration from Culver City. Josh?
And I know we're cutting in on our Q&A time, so I'll make this quick, but so we really say that, if you want, an equitable and accessible online experience, if you want an experience where, those that you serve can accomplish more tasks online, it's really this three-headed approach. You need a combination of the right people with the right processes or the right technology. Or sometimes I've seen the right person that creates the right process that then brings in additional people and partners with the right technology. You can't have one or two of all of them. So a couple of things that we want to leave you with that you all can start thinking about. So on the next slide, like really bring in, whether that's yourself or you've got some additional champions at the government, like ask yourself, the right questions. Like, is your technology future proof? Are you partnering with the right organizations that just give you technology? Or are you partnering with organizations that also help be thought leaders, that help you continue to be future-proofed? Is your organization educated? And Nissa talked about those ongoing trainings that she does with the content editors to make sure that as accessibility guidelines change, as maybe they're not in the platform as much and they forget about all of the ways to make content accessible, like what type of education and ongoing education you're doing through the organization, and also what are the legal implications, that you may have if you don't have an accessible or equitable experience. Next thing is also find out where you're at. So I know Montecito offers website reviews. So reach out to these organizations that will do an audit of the website. Download the benchmark report as well. We've got specific data. Do user group testings, like pull in, there's no feedback is better than resident, business, visitor feedback as well. And then lastly, on the next page, set goals, right? I think part of the challenge is that we can get overwhelmed by this process. So if we're looking at the top of the mountain and we're at the bottom of the mountain, you're never going to reach the top. So set approachable goals that once you hit, then you can set the next goal and next goal and next goal until you finally reach that peak of the mountain. But like both Anissa and Jillian were saying, it's a process, right? It's an ongoing, constant process to iterate. So at that, I believe we have one or two other slide with additional resources of either reaching out to get a scan, where Montecito can provide you an audit of the website. A couple of I don't know, there you go. Yeah, a couple of different handbooks for you all, the Hemingway app, some case studies. But Jillian, unless there's any additional context from the Montecito side, I that you want to add, I guess we can open it up for Q&A.
All right, I was muted there. Did not have anything to add, and yeah, no, super excited to jump into Q&A. So I'm just going to open this chat box. I'm trying not to be a Zoom noob, but despite my best efforts.
And as people are thinking, oops, sorry, Jillian. As people are thinking of potential questions, unless anyone reached out directly from you, as you and Anissa were talking about the reading level, I was looking through seeing who we had here. Everyone was calling out like, I work for the city or this city. It seems like, at least present here, there's a lot of communities, a lot of people that work for very diverse communities. So from a reading level perspective, one of Open Cities customers actually told me this, that apparently, usually the default for websites to translate is Google Translate. The higher the level, reading level on the website, the more difficult, the more inaccurate Google Translate is. And it's never perfect, but if it's at an 8th grade reading level, the translation crosses a little bit better. So always need to focus on reading level, obviously, but if we serve a diverse community, that's even more important.
Yeah, I recently was talking to our technical writer who took a course about, forget what it's called, but basically the English language is so difficult in the fact that we have so many words that can mean so many things. So there's an actual course you can take on how to write and not use any of the words, right being one of them maybe. I think it's actually how it's spelled, but that could have a double meaning so that it doesn't get caught up in translation. And also for people that are trying to learn the language when they're reading it themselves as well. So it's not easy, but there's plenty of kind of ways to start tackling it, I think.
And if people don't have any questions, if there's any brave souls on this, because I know, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, digital transformation, accessibility, and building an equitable culture looks like a lot of different things. So, if anyone on this call is doing anything within their city or county, I'd love for you to chime up. I'd love to spotlight the work that you've been doing, because I'm sure that there's things that we can learn. I know that there's things that we can learn as well. So is there any brave soul out there that wants to pat themselves, their community on the back?
Brave souls. I get it. Accessibility is hard, but it is just taking those first steps. And I liked what Anissa mentioned about helping her content editors kind of focus on the things that they're going to run into most, and instead of trying to inundate them with information about like the giant kind of vast amount of things that you need to do a completely accessible website, but what is the context in your individual role, I think is a really good way of tackling it, because then it's just digestible and related to their role. And doesn't mean you'll hit everything. There will still be a few things, but I think that was one of the things I really enjoyed hearing, and might even kind of work on my team a little bit more to make some kind of specialists in different areas, so that we're all not trying to be all-knowing experts.
There's a lot of different government leaders that are focusing on equity. One of the ones that I love to follow, I'm a big LinkedIn fan, the CIO at the city of Philadelphia, that whole digital team over there are doing some pretty cool things. And I know that that's a larger city, and sometimes, if you're from a smaller community, you can look at those larger cities and you're like, ooh, but we don't have the resources to do that. But even just to start like getting your wheels spinning around, hey, how can we take what they're doing and transfer that over to our smaller community? And unfortunately, I can't think of his name. But yeah, that digital team's doing some great things.
And I'd like to add, because, oh, sorry, someone has a question.
Go ahead, Anissa.
I just had an experience yesterday. Someone had filled out one of our EV electric car vehicle charging forms, and I happened to have my contact information on that page that they were filling out, and they called me because they were confused on the process. And it just, This is one, obviously, we don't have a service page for yet, but it just reinforces that need that having a form is never enough. You need to have a page that explains the process, walks that person through the expectations, and because they're like, oh, well, what happens next? Do I need to schedule an inspection? How long does it take? And these are great questions, and they were happy they are able to talk to me. But of course, I didn't have those answers. But if we had that service page up and running already, they wouldn't have needed to call anyone because they would have already known those next steps and all of that. And so every time I don't get to talk to people too often, because normally they don't talk to the webmaster, they talk to the people they're submitting the permit to. So it was a great experience to me to go, yep, I need to get on them to get that service page created for this one. We still have so many PDFs that need to be converted to online forms with service pages. And it just reinforces that need that if you do user-friendly information, you're not going to be bothering staff. So you're saving money and saving time for everyone.
For sure. I gave Josh an example. I was recently home in the States this summer, and we wanted to have a birthday party for my daughter at a local park. And we were like, okay, let's rent a pavilion, and not a resident. So I went into the park that we wanted to do, and it was like, oh my gosh, not only do I need to print a form and fill it in by hand, I have to bring it to their office with 2 checks. I don't have checks anymore. Like, I'm just like, I check for the deposit and a check for the actual rental. And I was just like, there has to be a different option. Went to a different township. They did everything online. I was like, here you go. Here's my credit card. The pavilion's booked. And it was a much better experience. So I will also say, if that is an income source for your county or your township or your city, that definitely helps having those seamless online experiences for sure.
I appreciate everybody for attending, and don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have any very specific questions. Don't be scared by the sales in my title. Like, I love talking about digital transformation. I love shouting from the mountaintop, what people are doing on this specific topic. So yeah, would love, I know Jillian would as well, would love to continue the conversation offline if you all are interested.
Yeah, my title's not as scary, but I will not try to sell you anything either. But no, I also enjoy having these conversations and also learning from all of you. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And yeah, Brandy, if you have any last words for closing.
Yeah, I want to thank so much for jumping on the call today. Thank you to our panelists. That was very insightful, and I learned a lot, and it was fantastic as you thinking through like where your community is going, how you need to communicate that on your website. It was just fantastic. Everyone, you saw I chatted in. I'll be emailing out a copy of the recording of this. You have the link to the report, but I'll include that in case you didn't get to copy it when Josh sent that. So you have both of them. So you'll have both of them all in one place. But if you need anything else, please reach out to Jillian, Josh, and Anissa, or myself. We're happy to help any way that we can. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. And thank you, Anissa.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Anissa. Have a good one. Bye.